Predatory freshness, one, two, we the bestest. We the best. Predatory freshness, one, two, we the bestest. We the best. Predatory freshness, one, two, we the bestest. We the best. Predatory freshness, one, two, we the bestest. We the best.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Lime Rock Park here in Lakeville, Connecticut. This 1.3 mile long course, it seems very short, but it's very technical, and so far throughout practice, we've seen numerous cars fly off into the safer barrier. So as we begin to enter into qualifying, they need to start to tone things down, work on their balance, and be prepared to actually race for today. My name is Brian Schubert, and Ben Roprack will be joining me on the broadcast booth today. My friend, welcome to iRacing.
Thanks, Brian. Happy to be here, man. Really excited to see what these guys can do here at Lime Rock tonight. Formula V's, man, one of iRacing's best additions. Really fun little hot rods rolling around on the track, nice and light, nice and nimble. But because they're small doesn't mean they can't cause trouble, just like you said.
There's a lot of trouble in these cars. I mean, when you have the rear engine practically over the rear axle, almost like a Porsche, I mean, driving these things is a pain. It's difficult to do. We mentioned car balance before, and that's all this race is going to be. Qualifying, racing, it's all going to be about making sure that you're minding your P's and Q's with this car and its balance, because if you're coming into a braking zone with too much throttle or too much brake, I mean, that car is going to be upset. It's going to lift off, oversteer on you, and you're going to be going backwards into a tree. I mean, Jeremy Clarkson has mentioned that many of times in the past. If you don't make the corner, you're backwards into a tree, and it's just not a good day. Now, we have a unique formula for today, Ben. Can you walk me through what we're expecting to see today?
Well, yeah, today is going to be a little interesting. So this is the first unofficial race of our Downshift Formula V League. And in order to allow a greater field of drivers to come in, we're going to do a little bit of a heat elimination style race. So what we're witnessing now is some cars that are starting to fill up the track, and they're going to go out and they're on their qualifying right now. They get 5 laps to set a good time, but they're all together. Open qualifying, lots of hecticness, dodging other drivers, crazy stuff going on. Once that's set, we're going to break off into 2 separate heat races where the top 12 finishers in each of those races make it to the final 30-minute race to the finish.
64 teams have entered in. We're going to have to see if all 64 end up qualifying. Now, entering into a 5-lap qualifying, you have to be very mindful of what's going on around you, particularly if all callers just enter into the track simultaneously. So what are the strategies entering into qualifying? Do you go out at the start of your session? Do you go out at the end of your session? Do you try to go out with a buddy to have a draft? Because these Formula Vs draft like crazy. When we actually enter the race, we're going to see multiple cars wide on the front straight, blocking all that air. So what can we expect in this qual?
It's going to be a mixture of a lot of different strategies. I definitely think draft is going to be helpful, but you also run the risk of that guy in front of you having an issue, right, Brian? So you really have to be careful who you choose to buddy up with if you do. If it's me personally, if I'm feeling it, I'm probably going to try to roll out there in as much space as I possibly can and try to put in 5 clean, unhindered laps. Though with 64 cars on Lime Rock, that's probably unlikely.
I mean, my strategy is very similar to that, Ben. I tend to go out by myself. I'm either the first car out or I try to gap myself because I know I personally run better when I have separation. Now, of course, when you go to fast tracks and, there's only 7 corners here at Lime Rock, there's a lot of long straights. So drafting is going to be very important, but you also have to kind of find your own personal balance. And so far, we're seeing a lot of cars already rolling on track. We had like 20 of them just instantly go out, and that's quite terrifying, but they seem to be pretty well spread out, at least at the start of this 25-minute qual.
Yeah, it's I'm telling you, it's going to be absolutely crazy.
Well, there you go.
Oh, we got a spin already. Brian Vols around. My goodness, Brian. I mean, it is going to be so different. We see another car missing a wheel entirely. I mean, the amount of things that are happening simultaneously, there's so much in front of me running down the screen right now. Just lots and lots of cars going off a track, trying to find their footing. I am just really nervous, excited. There's a lot of words I could use to describe how I feel about how this race is going to go. As we see a driver trying to run on 3 wheels there. That is the 34 car.
Brian, Ben, I'm no expert, but last time I checked, and maybe you could tell me otherwise, 4 wheels are kind of required to be quick here at Lime Rock, but tell me if I'm wrong.
I honestly have nothing to add to that statement, Brian. I think you've nailed that one on the head, and I appreciate your expertise here in the booth with me today.
I'm always applying insight, SCCA driving instructor. That's the first thing that we teach, our students is you have to keep all four wheels, all four corners intact. The moment when one of those corners, teleports into Narnia, it tends to not work out very well for you. And also, I want to shout out Brian Vole for rocking Downshift Esports on the side of their car. I mean, after all, this is a recruitment race for Downshift for the Formula V series, and we're just trying to show new drivers, almost indoctrinate them into the world of the SCCA Formula V.
Yeah, it's great, and our paints editor Chris Needham, actually the sponsor of the series for Needham Designs, just does an absolutely fantastic job. It's like you said, one smooth, slick looking livery riding around on that 44 car out there. I mean, and I can't say enough. I've seen a lot of his work in a lot of other, and I actually personally have a few different myself, but always just does a fantastic job with everything that he does. So it's really exciting to have him help us out and throw together some of these Downshift sponsored rides.
And if you've fallen in love with design, make sure you message Chris on his social media platforms. We'll have production grab that for us in a second. If you want a custom helmet, a custom race suit, or a lovely car design so everybody can salivate over, please make sure to hit up our friend Chris. And again, I just love seeing all these lovely cars. We also mentioned the Sharpie car earlier today. Now, sadly, I don't know if I'm brave enough to run the Sharpie car because if you tag a gearbox, which will most likely happen when we actually enter into one of our races because a gearbox is exposed in the Formula V, well, when you have a giant Sharpie mark, a giant paint mark on the back of your car, it's very apparent who did that. I came from karts for a very long time ago, and on the side of my helmet, I have Brian Schubert, and that's all nice and dandy. It looks cool, but when you do some shenanigans on track, it's not like I can say, "Oh, it wasn't me," when they see my name on the side of the helmet.
Yeah, I guess that is definitely an easy way to identify who done it for sure, Brian.
I guess I have a bad color scheme because my Spec Racer Ford is bright yellow, like highlighter yellow. So I also can't, hide. There's no anonymity there at all with my color scheme. And a brilliant scheme, too, this nice red and green Christmas-esque color. So far, we've had some early oopsies, but for the most part, for having 64 cars and qualifying, things tend to be pretty tame. I mean, small wheels being dropped here and there, but for the most part, everybody is keeping all four wheels in the blacktop.
Yeah, as we see, the 16 car of Corey Abbott just jumped up the board. I watched him now in fourth place on our qualifying charts out there looking to lay down some rubber and get some good times in. So it should be pretty exciting. And he's got a nice looking little hot rod there that he threw together himself. Just so many drivers on track. It's so exciting when you get this big group of cars out there like this. It's awesome. I love car fields.
Now, Ben, this is a recruitment race, but there are some familiar faces. Can you walk me through the field and show me some players and some drivers that we need to highlight that are returning members from the past season?
Well, I'll tell you what, and of course the last season was in the street stock, so all these guys are new to the Formula V as far as Downshift is concerned. You cannot have a conversation about Downshift if you don't talk about Jimmy Hayden. This guy won 6 races last season in the street stocks. He is on fire, sitting on top of the charts yet again. I mean, this guy is something else, man. He has got so much speed, a little bit of real world experiences. He's got a background in karting as well, so you guys should definitely hook up over dinner sometime. I'm sure you guys would have some information to share, but
war stories.
Yeah, something like that. But he also came in. A lot of drivers, and that's something I was pretty excited about. Is a lot of drivers came in with their own unique paints as well. So it's really nice to see some of these guys out there rolling around and getting it done. As we see him overshoot the chicane, but looking behind him, it's probably not a bad idea because we have a car spinning right behind him. But we'll jump on back a little bit here to Kenny Caution, as he is called, Mr. Kenneth McGrath, driver of the number 2 car with what I can only assume is something that has been personally designed to hurt my eyes, Brian. What am I looking at there?
It's an eyesore. That's for sure. Now, his brother is also racing. Koi has just actually entered into the field. He was delaying his qualifying. Now, when we saw practice, which wasn't actually broadcast, Koi had a strong run. He was sitting at one of the fastest qualifiers. He ran a 109. And so far, Jimmy Hayden is the only person to have published a 109. Actually, I get broadcasted cursed as two 109s finally get pushed as well. So we're starting to see the top of the field enter into that 109. If you're a fast driver, that's exactly where you want to be.
Yeah, it's definitely turning some good times, and you can see they're starting to get really tight up there in the 109s. Is boy navigating a little oopsie there coming out of one of the chicanes. I mean, it's really going to come down to these guys avoiding some of those late turn spins, Brian. I am just really concerned about hooked tires in these little spins and incidences because it does not take a whole lot to pop your tire off and ruin your whole day.
Well, that's one of the dangers to running a Formula car, Ben, is since your wheels are actually exposed, you have to be very mindful of where you're putting those corners. If you're, running side by side and you end up wheel hopping, now, sure, this is iRacing, but those cars can and will go upside down. So when you're in a stock car, you have the luxury of just, banging the sides of the car. Here in Formula V, if you do that, your day will be over.
Crazy advanced technology we call fenders, Brian, and they work pretty well.
Hey, I come out of a Spec Racer Ford. I have plenty of donuts at the side of my car and at the side of my go-kart. There is many of races where the numbers on the side of my cart doesn't exist anymore.
So here we have
But it's
another
racing.
driver, just to go back to our topic here of guys returning from last season here. Brett Wolf, currently sitting on the pits, rocking the number 5 car. Red Bull, of course, because as I was told previously, that is currently his blood type, as you can clearly see. But Brett and I, I'm sorry, we're on a team that ran at Nürburgring 24, and he had some really good success in the TCR Audi. So looking for him to get some momentum going into the first race of the road season. Hey, Brian.
Vision is going to be very key for our drivers as we have 64 cars currently live in this qualifier. What good vision means is you're going to be scanning ahead and not impaling yourself
Oh
coming
my
out of pit
goodness.
lane. That's always a plus, Ben. If you're looking ahead and you see something,
Oh
congesting
my
pit
gosh.
lane, it's best that you don't, insert your
Oh my
nose
gosh.
into places that it doesn't belong. Now, shenanigans are taking place, but again, I don't want to make of what I'm seeing, man.
I mean, we have Coy McGrath, or I'm sorry, Kenny McGrath rather, driving away from what I can only describe as a crime scene. There was a car flipped over at the end of pit road that he drove away from. I mean, open qualifying sure is a hoot, Brian.
I mean, I'm on board for increasing the ante to 64 cars now in SCCA runoffs. We do see 64 cars, and I can promise you it happens frequently. I'm not sure what we just saw there.
Oh.
Somebody has decided to blow a braking zone. Now, just a reminder, ladies and gentlemen, Formula V's, there are 3 pedals to the floor. One's going to be your accelerator, one's going to be your brake, and one's going to be your clutch. It's highly recommended to use that brake to deaccelerate that car, but technically speaking, if we're talking about the optimal line here on Lime Rock, actually you're going to be turning the car a lot with the wheels. You're going to be trying to avoid that brake as much as possible, using the engine braking to deaccelerate the car and actually using the friction generated from turning the wheel, because since these are very low horsepower cars, if you're driving them not as a momentum car, if you're just constantly swinging that gas up and down like you would if you had a big bore muscle car, you're simply just not going to be quick.
Yeah, but one thing you have to take a look at here as we jump on board with the number 11 car of Andrew Wernick running out his qualifying lap, sitting back, just currently still trying to get a time on the board. But one thing that you really have to pay attention to with these cars, Brian, is the tires. These are not Formula One Indy style width tires. These are very narrow, and there is not a whole lot of grip to be had on those. So while you're braking, while you're downshifting, while you're doing everything you can do as we see, we've got a warning there from race control. But while you're trying to slow the car up and get it under control, it honestly doesn't take a whole lot of persuasion to get the rear end to come around on you. And we've seen this a couple times now in practice, but a lot of it comes down to drivers' decisions to put the car in a second gear. And we talked about this in a few practice sessions prior to this, but the way the car is set up, first and second gear are very, very short, and then third gear ends up being very, very long. And when you come out of third and you go into second, you get the wheel hop from the rear tires trying to slow down to the second gear as it goes in, and it ends up being a catastrophe for your turn entrance, and you end up, finding a tree, finding a turtle shell, finding whatever that guy found on the side of the road. Not good things, Brian.
Downshifting
Yes.
is so important. Heel and toe, the lost art of heel and towing. It blows my mind how many competent drivers can't heel and tow a race car. I mean, simply put, this car is made in the 60s, and if you want this thing to drive, you heel and tow, because if the engine and transmission speeds aren't matched, you're going upside down, as you mentioned that wheel hop. So critical that you're always evaluating your car as a driver.
Yes, absolutely. And you really have to stay on top of this. As much as this is a rookie class car, in the iRacing sim itself, I do not deem it as one of the more simple cars to drive. I think it's easy to drive. I think it's a little bit more difficult to drive fast, Brian.
I mean, we see that with the Spec Racer Ford in game too. That is such a driver car, and you can find ways around it. When we hop into like more traditional Formula cars, you hop into the Formula Continental, the F4, where those are more point and click style Formula cars, where you get hard on the brakes, entering that braking zone, you have some maximum efficiency, and then you roll off that brake as downforce changes. And the V in the Spec Racer, you just do not have that luxury. Again, we keep mentioning liftoff oversteer. That's going to be a big factor in those two vehicles because of the way the engine is mounted. You do not have the luxury of just slamming on the brake and hope that you make corners.
Yeah, you really do have to drive it, and it's something that I personally, as a driver, enjoy, and a lot of times it definitely becomes a task, especially when you get to some of the more complicated tracks here. As we're just going to ride on board here with Brett Wolf. Again, he hops out of the pits on his fourth lap currently, trying to get it warmed up to see if he can get a time in. Currently sitting back on 13th on the boards, which, to be honest, isn't too bad, although we only do currently have 21 drivers with times listed, so this open qualifying setup is sure looking like it's making it difficult for guys to get a time down on the track, Brian.
Only 21 cars have published times. Now, it's a 25-minute qual, and in theory, you can go out any time that you want. And we saw the majority of cars actually go out at the start. Coy was really the only one that delayed the start, at least any of the notable drivers that delayed their start by about 10 minutes. But again, that's optimal. You want to try to find the, path of least resistance. What that means is you want to find a gap so you're able to draft, but you also don't want to have, just a bottleneck of cars in front of you. Now, sure, that does, create a larger air pocket, but that also can start to slow you down. That's where good qualifying discipline comes forward. If you, go out during traffic, what you can do is you sacrifice a lap, so you build a larger gap between the car in front of you, and then when you go into your true hot lap, well, you can use the air resistance of car in front of you to close that distance, and if you've done it right, you should catch that car right as you cross that finish line, and then you go back to lifting a big mount, having, some room in front of you so you can run another good lap.
Yeah, and those tactics are great, and I think that we had kind of touched on that when we initially started talking about it, right? You definitely want to give yourself enough space to get a good lap in, but at the same time, if you can utilize, we see the 12 car get a little loose here and spin it around in the last chicane, but you definitely are looking to try to use the advantage of some of that draft, right? Now, I would hope that if I had 5 laps in this, but if I had 5 laps, I would want at least one of them to be just me, out there getting a lap in myself. And then once I get a lap in that I'm kind of happy with, hopefully that's lap 2 or 3, I might try to, maybe get on the radio, talk to my buddy Jimmy, say, hey, Jimmy, think you can get out here and get in front of me and I can suck up to that very narrow rear end of that car and get some draft here, try to get some speed built up and make my lap a little bit better. And you definitely don't want something like that happening in front of you there. The 9 car totally checking up in front of Brett. I don't quite understand what that was, so maybe Race Control will have to take a look at that. But definitely don't want purposeful impeding of other people's races. That's not what we're here.
So far, Jimmy Hayden has been unchallenged in his pole position. He ran a 109.60 one of his first laps. He's been able to better that with a 109.46. Corey Whitting is the only driver who's been able to get anywhere close to that 60. He currently has a 109.65, and he has published his final lap. For the most part, Ben, everybody in the top 13 has ran 5 laps so far. So we're seeing the front end, the sharp end of the field completing their qualifying early, and, well, more of our newer drivers to the recruitment starting to put out their laps.
Yeah, and maybe the delay is a good decision, right? Maybe you get some time out on the track where you cannot be bothered by other drivers. Maybe that's their plan. And again, that very well could work, but we'll see how it pays off here. See the 17 car starting to get his run out here on the track. I'm looking to get accomplished with probably only a few minutes here left the session, so time definitely winding down. These guys need to hurry up and get their laps in before they transfer over.
We're seeing a lot of cars enter into the tank slapper where they're just carrying way too much yaw into the corner. To me, that says that they're not really having good vision discipline. They're not looking ahead of the car. They're not minding the apex. And then when they actually hit the apex, they're using their peripheral to spot and watching their track out. Vision technique is one of the most important things when it comes to racing cars, and actually probably one of the most difficult things to do on the iRacing thing, because you just don't have depth perception. That's one of the weaknesses that you can have, in a monitor. And that's why it's lovely when I see somebody that have these, grandiose VR setups.
Yeah, actually, our buddy Kicker has himself quite the nice VR setup, and I've had the opportunity of helping him with spotting for his IndyCar endeavors. And yeah, VR is definitely pretty neat. My favorite is the IndyCar. I don't know if you guys know, it's got that little halo on the front of it, and it's got that pillar splits the driver's vision right down the middle. And my favorite thing with VR is that you kind of poke your head around the side of it if there's somebody right in front of you down the straightaway. but yeah, no, 100%, and I agree. And it's definitely a training thing too. And a lot of times, when I've tried to help out some of my buddies as far as getting going in iRacing and getting corners figured out, it's I always ask, where are you looking on corner exit? Where are you looking on corner entry? And where you're trying to go, because a lot of times, and you're the expert here, but a lot of times you end up going where you're looking, right? So if I'm looking at the apex of the corner, my movements are kind of naturally progress me towards the apex of that corner, and I definitely use that technique a lot when I'm practicing turning left, Brian.
That's the beauty of road racing. You have to do left, rights, ups, and downs. I mean, Lime Rock has a ton of elevation. When we start to look at the back side of the track over between turn 3 up and through turn 5, there's so much elevation change. Actually, one of those corners ends up peaking. It's called turn 5, the uphill. And that's a dangerous corner to take because you're having the car induce braking as well as the gravitational changes of the track. And sometimes drivers are going to have to fully lift when going up that corner because of 2 reasons. One, because of rev limiter, because the rear wheels are lifting off the ground. If you're full throttle there, well, when the car gets light, the wheels aren't going to have the same contact patch and you could start to spin them. And if you spin the engine, bad things start to happen.
And it looks like they continue to happen up and down all the way into the wall, the trees, the benches, other drivers. And we've seen it a few times here in qualifying already. It's definitely been quite a melee. And I do, not sure if I had mentioned, but I remember previously the drivers of the number 37 and 36 car have been disqualified for what race control deemed to be unnecessary driving under qualifying. So definitely need to stay on task here. And I mean, and we're here to race, so we will not be tolerating it. Trying to eat other people's races, make unnecessary moves on track, Ryan.
Unnecessary roughness, number 36 and 37.
Yep.
Ejection penalty.
Yep.
No longer here in Downshift Esports. And I just got word that we're now live on Twitch. So everybody on Twitch, welcome to Downshift Esports. We're currently in the middle of our 25-minute qualifier here at Lime Rock Park. This is to enter into one of our 2 heat races, a 15-minute heat race, followed by our 30-minute feature. Now, unfortunately, not all of the cars will end up qualifying for that feature race, so it's important that our drivers have great qualifyings and great heat race performance.
Yep, they're definitely going to want to try to sneak themselves in here, as we still only cars in total, as far as I am aware, that have times posted. So I don't know what these guys are hoping to happen, but I definitely want to be towards the front in my heat, Brian, because I do not want to have to try to come through the field just to qualify for the main race. That is not what I'm looking for.
Yeah, a lot of mistakes are being made around that, 15th qualifier marker. We're just seeing a lot of, again, it's a recruitment race. A lot of rookie mistakes are being made, and that's exactly what we'd expect from a recruitment race. This is a way for drivers to learn about the Formula V, learn about us as a league and Lime Rock itself. And it's nice to see brand new faces. Of course, there's some returning faces, but we want to bring more drivers into iRacing and into Downshift Esports.
Yep, and it's definitely well reciprocated there. It's definitely a learning environment, as I say that as the 9 car completely. Oh, brother. Well,
Not my
it's
number.
well, it is the recruitment race. Drivers are still learning. I'm not quite sure if the 9 experienced some wheel lock there or exactly what had happened. Might want to go back here and we can take a look at that on our replay here. But that didn't look all that good. Oh, that is the aftermath of that incident. But yeah, I believe the 9 car experience. Oh my goodness. Well, that is also not what you want to do. Is like that car got hit there and pieces in the wall. Wow, melee qualifying. Wow.
And the optimal line into turn number 1 is very little braking. In fact, your braking isn't necessarily to deaccelerate, at least on turn end, it's to transfer weight to the front tires. And then after that, you can do some braking towards a mid portion of that combination corner entering into turn 2. But really, that final deacceleration is going to come down to that downshift.
Absolutely. Here, as we take a look at the drivers gridding here for what is going to end up being the first of 2 heats. See drive familiar faces of Jimmy Hayden coming in at first place, Coy McGrath from 4th, and a few others, Anthony Cuthbert, Corey Abbott, and rounding out the top 12 here on this board. And I'm not sure exactly how many drivers are in the confusion here. The initial plan was only to do 1 heat race, eliminate the top 25, but I believe Nation had other ideas, so we've been split into 2 heats and see how that goes.
Only 22 cars actually qualified. So there's a lot of unknown variables entering into our 2 heat races. Ben, is that going to be a factor as we look into these heat races? Are drivers who have yet to have seat time in this car and this track, could that potentially lead to a loose cannon?
I definitely believe so. I am a firm believer in getting the car out and getting laps in yourself in a situation where you're affecting other races. Um, hopes that they would do that, and uh, maybe they had something to the house, something like that. I'm not 100% sure what the tactic would be there, but you got guys like Jimmy who are out there running laps. I also noticed a lot of laps from Coy McGrath and Brett Wolf as well. Really putting the time in, trying to get their practice before the race goes green, and I think that can only help them in the long run. Is how the car progresses over the run, gets lighter with tires start to wear. Lots of variables, but here we go, getting ready for the green of the first heat.
Drivers revving their motors as the green flag waves for our first heat race of the day. It's only 15 minutes, but that sprint race is going to feel like an eternity. The cars are already starting to fan out, entering into turn 1. It's 4 wide. Tires are being locked up, but everybody, for the most part, has been able to make it through turn number 1, entering into the combination corner, the sister corner of turn 2. Chaos enters as cars go upside down.
Oh no, it's the downshift. I see Brian Voles is one of the drivers involved in that accident that happened early. That is not the way that he wanted to start the race. That is, man, not how we wanted to see it go, as we see more cars spinning off a track. This is not necessarily unpredicted, just kind of hard to watch, if I'm honest.
Whitting has had a good run so far. He qualified in that second spawn, has been able to take Hayden into turn number 2, and Sato qualifying in that third spawn is going to be maintaining that position. The top 3 cars have been able to break away by 4 seconds. That's due to that melee that we saw going into turn 1 and 2. on board with Clifton, and he has some right front corner damage due to those shenanigans as more cars continue to veer off track.
My goodness, old-fashioned melee. I think what you were saying about drivers to practice a little bit before the race gets going, starting to come to a little bit of fruition here. But as we look towards the front of the field, we've got Jimmy Hayden leading likes of Soto and Whitting, right on his rear, I guess I can't say bumper, rear, whatever that thing is on the back of the car, gearbox,
Gearbox, yeah.
yeah, that pointy thing on the back end of the pencil, that thing. So this definitely looks like it's going to be not a one-car breakaway, though, as we see the yellow flag has been thrown, so that must be for a caution that was deemed so bad by race control that they need to throw a full course caution. That is quite something.
And as you mentioned, it's a full course caution. Normally in road racing, we're going to have local yellows waving or standing depending on the circumstance of that corner. But race control has spotted something that needs this full course. And that's actually going to be quite unique because we saw Sato leading the race for a bit. We saw Whitting leading that race, but Hayden was able to get his pole position back. He's currently published as our leader so far, and hopefully he was able to make that pass before that full course caution was made.
Well, let's see if we back and take a look at. I'm not quite sure. There was a lot of incidents happen here. See a lot of cars on track, off in turn one there, possibly blocking. Oh, as we see this driver getting spun. Turn one, Terry Miller, as he goes around, and I think something about the absolute melee that we saw in turn one possibly caused, or I guess gave reason for race control to throw the full course yellow here.
Terry Miller was currently sitting in 12th. He's been up 22 spots so far. He was our fastest driver, not fastest driver, but the driver who's been able to move through the field the best, and he's still being shown in that 12th spot. So even with that spin, it's not affecting him too much. He has at least maintained that spot as of now. But so far, we actually just got word from race control. We're only going to be having one 15-minute heat race, and it's looking like our top 25 cars won't be qualifying. It's actually going to be the top 12 bit.
All right. Yeah. iRacing definitely did not agree with what we wanted to do there, so that is a little bit disheartening and or unfortunate, however you put it, because I was kind of looking for an old-fashioned 30-minute melee there with 25 cars on track. But it might give some of the 12 drivers that do make it into the cut a chance to spread their wings a little bit and race with a little bit of room and possibly less debris and or other drivers still sitting on the track.
Now, Ben, how come we're seeing times that aren't as quick as qualifying? In qualifying, we saw 109s being shown, and so far our lead drivers have been unable to even break into the 110s.
Well, in qualifying, you're looking to try to get yourself into a position where you can, get your best run out in the open, no pressure. But in a race situation, you've got drivers trying to pass from behind, possibly have to lining up blocks, and you're going too wide in corners and or dodging other people's incidents. All of that is really going to slow you down. And in most cases, and in most motorsports, in my experience, racing times always suffer a bit from what can be accomplished in, say, a qualifying or even a practice setting.
Yeah, it's important to note there are technically two lines, what I refer to the racing line and the driving line or the qualifying line. Qualifying line is the optimal, the fastest line of the track, and the racing line changes throughout the race because tires degrade, surface temperatures change, and also sometimes, the fastest line has a big arc to it, and if you were to have that arc during a race, well, somebody's going to put their nose where it doesn't belong, and you're going to end up going too wide into that corner. So it's another reason why we tend to see, times deviate significantly from qualifying to racing.
Right, but racing is not all that bad. Sometimes really cool
We're here to race.
happen. Exactly. So, and to highlight this, I would like to take a look at one of our drivers here, Mr. Andrew Hardcastle, who has up 14 positions from initially qualified, now currently sitting in 10th, possibly, taking advantage of some of the shenanigans, as we called it, on screen. And sitting in a pretty good spot, Brian. Got himself 2 positions to the good for making it into the main event. How do you think his chances are?
I mean, his chances are wonderful right now. I mean, 14 spots up is incredible. Now he's in the 10th spot. Right behind him is David Septon, who's also up 19 spots. So we're seeing that, 10th through 13th cars, they have had wonderful runs. Now that's partly because they may not have qualified, but I mean, they're still battling with that pack, and it's only going to get better for them since our pace car is out gathering the field.
Yeah, and I don't know if these drivers had expected as much. I had some conversation with race control prior to the start of the race, and he didn't seem as worried about not having a caution as he was almost pretty certain there would be a situation with that many drivers on track that he would have to throw the yellow for some sort of crash blockage on the track or some other hazard to the racing line that want to stop all the cars from actually trying to garner positions. Because some of the hardest impacts we've on road courses, especially with local cautions, is drivers not yielding or not quite understanding the danger of cars parking the track as they come around some blind corners and just nowhere to go, crash right into sometimes stopped cars.
Well, the pace car is in. We're underway green for the second time here today with Downshift Esports at Lime Rock Park. Turn 1, once again, not actually claiming anybody. It's nice to see that. Now that's because we're no longer too wide. Our green flag start for the second time is going to be single file. Everybody minding their lines and doing a wonderful job at that.
Yeah, maybe the decision was uniquely, hey guys, let's run a few laps before we decide to start crashing into each other. I could be wrong, but if I'm out there, that might be a discussion I'm trying to barter with some of these. Fortunately, race car drivers usually don't think like that.
17 car of Christopher Hunt making a nice pass going in through the S's. And Hayden is still maintaining his position. In fact, he was able to pull Soto and a couple of these corners. Now, Soto isn't too far behind, and Hayden's going to make a mistake, forced to go just a bit defensive. And that's going to be a battle for the front straight.
Yeah, and you get it wound up coming around the final corner there into the final straight. I am very bad with the turn names here because I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and the oval's done. But the draft is so significant in these cars, like you had mentioned back in practice, that if a car is lined up on the rear bumper, they can really just get a great run, like you saw Soto pull there on Jimmy Hayden and just drive right on by him like he's standing still.
I mean, Soto made that pass coming out of the chicanes in turn 6. He elects to go to the outside line in turn 7. He runs the outside, side drafting his way in through turn 1, and still on the outside into the combination corners of turn 1 and 2. A wonderful textbook pass for Soto, but as he gets a little bit wide, he's going to be delayed on that throttle. It's Hayden's turn to run this pass back. A attempted defensive line for Soto, but it's Whitting who's able to go 3 wide into the chicane.
Holy
and
cow.
it's Whitting who's able to make it through. Nobody makes contact. It's a great line, and once again, our top 3 mix things up.
That is an unbelievable pass there by Corey Whitting. I mean, that is impressive. That is very impressive. I'm gonna like to take another look at that if we could. I mean, they were 100% 3 wide as you see him sitting here in the inside, and I mean, wow, what a great run that he had off of those 2 drivers battling each other. He just cruised right on by, right through all of the carnage, get right to the lead as we see now as we're watching the replay. He has since then fallen back. I'm almost convinced that it's not a good thing to be leading coming out of the last turn, Brian.
It most certainly is not. You mentioned the draft, and boy, do these things draft. And it's on Banks to return to that draft. He was currently 3 seconds down only a few laps ago, but since the leaders are battling in front of him, he's going to be able to grab that draft as once again they attempt 3 wide, entering into the S's. These drivers are showing wonderful mechanics as they're constantly going multi-cars wide, but they have yet to touch wheels. Great sportsmanship.
Yeah, I mean, just a fantastic drive from these guys. And we see a little bit further in the back here have the likes of Brian Voles around Caleb Clifton and Anthony Cuthbert, and even Corey Abbott trying to get up in the mix as we have a little 4-way battle here for what ultimately will end up being 6th position. So every position counts, but at some point you almost got to wonder, hey guys, I'm trying to get into the final here. maybe we don't race each other so hard. If we stay where we're at, we all make it.
Our leader is starting to grab some of the back part of that field. Now, one of the problems with the Formula Vs is when you enter into lap traffic, they can act as an absolute chicane, not only because they are just a giant air dam, but because of the speed difference between our drivers. And if you're a clever driver, you can use those cars as a pick and you can separate yourself from the cars that you're currently racing. Soto has done a wonderful example of that as he starts to run away from Hayden. Again, that time difference was only about a 1/10 of a second, now entering to about a full second.
Yeah, it's definitely heating up again in the front as these guys are just trading. And like you had said, I think have the likes of Troy Banks starting to catch his way up to as the front three will play. Number 4 says, hey, I'm coming up there too. So it should be pretty interesting to see how these guys end up mixing it up. I really hope that nobody gets into an incident because I would love to see this action be carried into the final. We have another 30-minute session coming up shortly after the 15-minute run out in this.
Another example of the draft as Hayden goes by Soto. Again, that was a second time difference between those two drivers, and the draft made it all up. Hayden and Soto have been doing a masterclass so far, and Whiting is starting to fall just slightly off the pace. And he's going to be watching those mirrors as Bank is still doing his best to get to this field. That's an all-black car just behind our 3 leaders.
As we'll take a look now, as you look through his rear view mirror, or I guess right off his gearbox, and it's all black 24 car right behind Whiting. I mean, he's really got to be careful here because he's in the prime position coming into the last few corners. Get some draft, is now getting pushed a little bit wide off of his line here. We'll see how this one lines up. Still just unbelievably close racing. We have this pack, and then we have that pack back in the middle there, P5 through about P8 or P9. They're still just trading positions like crazy. I honestly don't know which one to watch right now, Brian. Oh,
Joseph
we've got a
Parker
crash.
leading that fifth. Oh no, it's a congestion. It's the 405 freeway here in LA.
Oh my
Everybody
goodness.
piles up. So many cars involved. So far, I can only mark the 44 of Brian Voles. He had a great run in practice, a great qualifying run, and this is a disaster to his race.
Yeah, we've got Brian Voles. It looks like Caleb Clifton and Corey Abbott all caught up in this. Yeah, look, of course, that's going to cause a caution here, but you see they're 3 wide into the corner trying to do exactly what the leaders managed. Looks like Brian Voles might got a little bit of loose, and oh man, just gets run over by the 10 car, and the 21 nowhere to go right behind him. I'm sorry, the 16 of Corey Abbott. Sorry, he's 21 in the other series. And just cars just trying to bail out and dodge the incident. So not surprised that race control decided to throw another caution. Heartbreak for the 44 car Brian Voles, who now sits on pit road in 13th, one position outside of the cutoff for the final race, Brian.
That's just the problem of so many cars trying to occupy that one space. One driver makes a mistake and there's just no margin of error. You're just going to be just driving over each other. Now, we're going to be seeing some cars passing the pace car. They're just trying to, well, get to the other side of the pace car because it's Hayden who's going to be leading that field whenever that green flag comes back. And this is a perfect position for Parker to be in. He was sitting in that 5th place spot, 10 seconds behind the top 4 lead pack. And now he's going to be returning to the back bumper of Banks. This is exactly where he wants to be in when we go green in just a few laps.
Yeah, this is a perfect opportunity for him to stay right up to the front and defend for his position to stay at least, if not in the top 12, possibly the top 5, as he's been doing just a fantastic job of keeping his nose clean and staying out of trouble. Kind of the driver that's been sitting on the island in between the 2 big clusters of cars in their battles might be enjoying the relaxing cruise through the elevation changes here at Lime Rock, Ryan.
And that's that Sharpie car that we were mentioning earlier, Parker on the 77. And these S's, these chicanes, the elevation changes are being quite the bane for our drivers today, Ben. And they're just going to have to be very mindful. Oh, the checkered flag is going to be thrown. We showed 15 laps, but again, this was a 15-minute sprint race, the only sprint race of the day. So Hayden is going to be the first place driver for our first heat race, but the top 8 will be inverted.
Yeah, so and I just actually got word from race control as that announcement was coming across. So the session seems to be having some issues, and again, we apologize
Oh
for the
no.
technical difficulties here. But uh, so race control has officially called a white flag, and then ultimately checkered as now to get these drivers basically in a spot where we can move on to the final session. Lots of technical difficulties in attempting to try to set up the heat race here. So definitely, definitely quite something. Um, they kind of unfortunate about that, but take a look at our results screen here, and but I guess we don't have results yet. Maybe the race isn't over. Getting a lot of mixed readouts currently. Oh, and there goes. Wow. Okay. Well, so I guess
I
we
was
get a
about to
warm up.
read.
Yeah. Well,
I was gonna read off who's our top 10, but since everything just got reset, I have no idea.
well, we inverted the top 8, so remember that is 100% what we're going to be doing here. See if I can. Oh, I don't
All my
have.
drivers have been mixed up. I have 64 drivers. I can promise you 64 drivers did not run. So, um, and
Goodness.
Soto is currently sitting at 24th. And since he was second place, there's no way he could be there even with an inverted field. Or at
I,
least, is it a full inversion or only a top 8 inversion?
It was only the top 8 inversion
Yeah.
as far as I was aware. But again, that was assuming that everything else was working properly. As we see, Ryan Voles is magically back on the track now with all 4 tires intact. I just go through a time warp, because I'm very confused as to what we're looking at right now here. I guess this is the warm up to final session.
Your guess is as good as mine. And
Hmm.
honestly, I'm okay with this being a warm up or being a race because the action that we've seen on track, even in qualifying, even in practicing, and during that heat race, has been mind blowing today, Ben. I mean, the battles, the spins, the shenanigans that we just saw coming down the hill into turn 6 to turn 7. I mean, it's going to be a brilliant race when we actually enter into that 30-minute feature.
Yeah, and I'm really hoping that we can iron out some of these technical errors here, trying to get the race figured how we would like it. Because, I mean, what a show these guys are putting on! As we saw 2 absolutely fantastic multi-car battles throughout most, if not all, of that entire first heat. I mean, just really, really close wheel-to-wheel racing and kind of stuff you really can't get enough of. I was very hopeful that these cars would be able to stay close to each other due to the advantage the second car gets off of the draft. So very happy to see some tight racing.
That's also partly the layout here at Lime Rock. Again, a mile and a half, basically 1.3 miles, only 7 corners, and incredibly long straightaways. Drafting is going to be the key. You will win the race in the draft. And if you're a clever enough driver, your whole strategy is to be right behind your opponent by just a tenth of a second. You come out of the west bend chicanes and you try to run them through turn 7, go underneath them, 2 wide, all the way down to the drag race, eventually crossing that finish line. Now, we're not quite there as we're allowing our drivers just a little bit of extra flexibility to remember the track and get used to more cars being on the racing surface.
Oh, and speaking of re-remembering the track, why don't we take a look at what Lime Rock has to offer as a speed, Brian, if you will.
Yeah, turn number 1 and 2 is that combination corner where you have to give just a bit going into turn number 1 to have the better line into turn 2, which will set you up for turn 3. Turn 3 to turn 4 is going to be the S's, and then we go to probably one of the greatest named straightaways in the history of racing, referred to as the no-name straightaway. There's a giant hill partway through that straight, and that's that corner or that part of the track where drivers just have to lift just that much to make sure that they're not revving their engines when the car gets light. At the top of the hill is turn 5, where they start to go back down to hill into the west bend chicane. Down to the chicane is turn number 7, a very fast corner, which leads into that final straightaway.
Oh, absolutely fantastic walkthrough. Thank you very much, Brian. I appreciate that. And and I just also would like to mention I did get race control and all of that mass confusion, that we have 25 drivers that did advance to this final session, so we are going to get our 25 drivers in a 30-minute session after all. It's Christmas here in Lime Rock Park.
You know, they say it's 5 o'clock somewhere, and it has to be Christmas somewhere too, right? Like that makes sense. You know, in some alternate universe, it's Christmas, almost Christmas for our driver, as he has a wonderful drift. Now, this is iRacing, not Formula Drift. These are, Formula V's, but almost a brilliant save. You could hear that throttle just being pressed, trying to drive that puppy out of that corner, but sadly, he has a date with the grass.
Well, I am quite impressed with the synchronization of both cars spinning sideways. And are you sure this isn't Formula Drift? Because if you told me what that was, this is kind of what I think it would look like. In my opinion, you got Formula cars and they're drifting. Oh, but no, this is
Brilliant.
This is fantastic. Yeah, I know, right? Why don't you put that on a T-shirt and burn it or something? But anyways, so we're doing. I mean, I'm really excited. I was really bummed that we were only going to have 12, so I'm glad that iRacing somehow found the audacity to put 25 cars out as it was instructed to do settings that apparently went awry there before the end of the session. But you have drivers getting here, and if you'd like to take us through the grid one more time, Brian, wind up where?
Terry Miller will be taking our drivers into turn number 1, as his first car on the left of him is going to be Graham, Cuthbert, Parker, Banks, Whitting, Soto, Hayden, Colley, Abbott, Hardcastle, and Clifton will be rounding out our top 12. And many of those drivers are going to sound very familiar, since those were the cars that were leading the field. Now, of course, this is an inverted field, so Jimmy Hayden technically has the pole going from the heat race, but since it's inverted, he's starting on driver's left in the 8th place spot.
Yep, and that is something that will hopefully roll into the official series once that gets going afterwards. And again, hopefully we can fight through some technical difficulties. But technical difficulties or not, these drivers are going to put in a good show as the lights are lit and we are off onto the 30-minute session, or 50-lap session, possibly, maybe not, who knows. Here we go. 3, 4, 5 wide. How many wide are we going to go into turn 1 here, Brian?
It's going to be 5 wide right now. Everybody in the sharp end of the stick is going to be able to make that corner one sideways, but he's going to stay on the grass. None of our drivers need to lift, and they're still going to continue on their momentum into turn 2, up into turn 3, and still our cars are 3 wide through the middle part of the field. Brakes are being locked, but still nobody's found themselves truly impacting. Honestly, a great comparison from the heat race to our actual race. No drivers really making big errors and no crashes into turn 1.
I am absolutely impressed. We had one driver, Anthony Cuthbert, get a little bit loose off the track, as you see him kind of sitting towards the back of the pack here, trying to catch back up, and a couple more off tracks. I guess I shouldn't have spoke that soon, but very, very clean turn 1 as far as this goes. I kind of just kept looking around the corner, and cars kind of kept generating off of the exit of turn 1 into the turn 2 section, and the S's there, as we see more cars, a 21 car getting loose in front of this pack up here. So guys are really going to have to be careful, as we do have a little bit of excitement up at the front here, as we see Jimmy Hayden, don't blink and you'll miss it, fighting currently for the lead, coming from 8th place all the way to the front. How did he do that?
I mean, Banks, Hayden, and Whitting are going to be fighting for that first place spot. Now, Soto finished 2nd place during that heat race, and he's still sitting more or less where he found himself starting this race. He started over in that 7th spot, and Soto's actually dropped back all the way into 9th. 6 seconds behind Banks, the current leader. Soto had a phenomenal run, and I guess he just kind of got mixed up in that, part of that spin into turn number 1, slowing him down just slightly. Our original leader so far, he is nowhere to be seen, actually a lap down, forced to dive into the pits.
Yeah, we're riding on board now with Soto, as you can see, and I do believe, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe my eyes deceive, but the front end of this car does look like it has a little bend or dent possibly. So there is a possibility that he could have been involved in something. Not quite sure exactly what had happened there, but as you see, he's really pushing the car. I wonder if he's trying to gain his time back, thinking that he should be up there with the likes of Hayden and Clifton, but really not that great of a start for Soto, and that's too bad, all considering, but that is how it goes when you invert the top 8 drivers, Brian.
I mean, there's a lot of talent in this field, and since it is a recruitment race, there's a lot of, new rookie drivers just getting their feet wet here in Downshift Esports, as well as in the Formula Vs at Lime Rock. So we're seeing just a large amount of skill, and it's actually a great place to be if you're a new driver, because you can learn from some of our legacy drivers coming in from that stock car side of our series.
As we see a couple drivers, initial corner there, and I'm going to take a look back here and see exactly what happened. But Nick Leahy, gonna butcher that name every time I say it, and I apologize. I attempted it, I did, but he had a little incident here, avoiding another car spinning into turn one, and as we saw, a lot of cars looked like they had a tough time here getting around turn one. I saw a lot of came off track instances that popped up, but it looks like he went all alone and then ended up getting back going. So no damage there, no issues. Good to see him rolling, can keep on with his race, and survive to crash another day, Brian.
Who on earth is in that beautiful paint scheme? Golf will always be my forever favorite paint scheme. I wanted to paint my Spec Racer Golf, but I was told I was only allowed to wrap it one color with secondary wrapping. So I was very pained that I couldn't do the full Golf scheme, but I'm going to live vicariously through that driver. I want to see who that is. I can't even spot out that number, but they've just become my favorite human being in this race.
I believe that is the 25 car, and I don't know if that's the number or not. I'm having a tough time reaching over to find him because they actually have a 3.5-second breakaway. The lead car for the moment is not Jimmy Hayden, but in fact Caleb Clifton, all the way at the front here with his mismatch paint scheme. Kind of cobbled together. Yeah, the eyesore there that Kenny McGrath was also running, and a few drivers were running, probably just to fight everybody's eyes for non-viewing pleasures. So I'm not quite sure who our mystery driver was there, but I believe they could have possibly been a lap down or possibly off the pace. But get a look at him. I believe that is the 29 car of Jordan Reiser, Brian.
Well, Mr. Reiser, I absolutely adore your car. Now, Banks was leading our race just a few laps ago, and he's fallen way off the pace. 6 seconds off, almost 7 seconds off, and down into that 8th place spot. He's going to be at that all black, that jet black car. Now, he does have competition in front of him, and that competition is going multi-cars wide. So that's going to be a great air pocket for him to start to catch back up. But it's almost like, Ben, his car is damaged in some way, because he was leading the field. He was well on pace, and all of a sudden, he's just brutally off.
Yeah, and if you see a lot of cars and a lot of situations here, as you see, he gets a great run up the hill and a little bit of contact, possibly, as he bumps in. But I'm having a tough time identifying exactly where these cars would show damage if they did. I'm not sure if it's just the driver maybe having a little spin, getting the tires hot. They get a little bit looser on the track, a little bit slippery or what, but things will happen to these drivers or these cars, and they will just kind of be off pace, but you can't really tell visually anything wrong, Brian.
Well, that comes down to like toe in and toe out. When you're making small, like mechanical hits, when you're bumping wheels, it's going to be very difficult to visually see that there's toe in, toe out. And you're going to see it in the wheel. And I don't know if iRacing actually is going to model that the wheel is fully sideways or whatnot when the car has that type of damage. But you certainly feel as a driver, the car starts to vibrate, it reverberates. And when you're going on the straight, you're like 90 degrees up, and it's just not a fun day. Unfortunately, I've had that happen to me once or twice when you hit a curb just a little too large.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't take a whole lot to upset these cars, and I believe that is the same story with most open wheel or lighter based road course cars. And my experience, I definitely try to avoid those, but some of the faster drivers in my life tend to hit those in just the right way, because there is a way and there are good curbs to hit. I've been told things such as avoid the sausage, hit the peppermint, and many other tactics that I don't quite understand. Again, I'm counting to 1, 2, 3, and 4 and starting again, possibly in repetition of up to 500 times, Brian.
Well, coming out of go-karts, I can say that I have a very bad habit of slamming curbs. I mean, if you see anything on Instagram or Facebook of go-karts on curbs, you know that they just vault them. And when you come into, cars like the Spec Racer 4 to 15, 60-pound car, I mean, you don't always have that luxury of challenging curbs. And here on Lime Rock, our Formula Vs, if you touch that curb, the car is going to get very upset. These cars do not appreciate weight transfer. And when you go into the corners, if your car is not balanced, you will not make that corner. And curbs are going to upset that balance.
Yeah, absolutely. And lots of things seem to upset the balance. I don't think they like grass either, as in my
Oh, no.
experience. It doesn't seem to fare well for them either. So I think uh, what we've gathered from this session so far is that Formula V do enjoy a steady diet of asphalt and asphalt only.
Well, fortunately, I come out of Spec Racer Fords and I race all in California, so we don't actually have grass here. So if you drop a wheel off, it's not really that punishing. I mean, there's some tracks in NorCal that have grass, but like for the most part, when you go to like Button Willow, Auto Club, like there is just no grass to be seen. And if you are on the grass, you're like 20 meters away from like the apex, and you've done something super wrong. So if you're ever in the grass, it's just not a good day for you.
Oh man!
Oh no, my Sharpie car, the 77 of Parker, is off the track. Oh, it's a bad day to be him.
Oh man, I'm not exactly sure what had happened
That's a
there.
straightaway.
This is straight away. I, I,
I believe
I don't.
that's turn 6 to turn 7. Yeah, then
Oh!
chicane. Oh wow,
He's
he's
got a little bit of
miles
help
away.
there. A little bit of help. A little bit of help as the 6 car gives him, I can only assume, a little nudge, possibly. Possibly not. And Corey Whitting falling from grace into the back of the pack, and I see both of these cars now have towed to pits and are currently sitting waiting repairs. Not a great race for these guys. That is very, very unfortunate. A lot of drivers having issues. I'm counting only about 14 or so cars left currently on the lead lap, as we'll catch back up with Jimmy Hayden and his hunt for Caleb Clifton, who has just kind of been sailing. But as the lap times will show you, Hayden seems to slowly, surely filling him in.
And another driver who's starting to get his positions back is Soto, sitting in that third place spot. Still 6 seconds off the pace, but they were close to 10 at one point, and they're still making time up on Clifton. Now, Soto was running in second place during that heat race earlier, and he was the only driver anywhere close to the 09s near Hayden during qualifying. So it's interesting that Clifton has been able to make such a strong run.
Yeah, and the whole start of the race was kind of a cluster there for a moment and sorted, and we see a lot of the drivers that were very dominant early on, somewhat faltering, possibly clawing their way back towards the front. And you've got to wonder how much of a wrench is this inverting the top 8 drivers going to throw in the series throughout the season. To be honest, I think it's a wonderful mechanic. It's definitely a twist that you're not expecting, where these guys that show you the speed that they can get to the front or possibly qualify might have to do it again, starting from closer back to the 8th, 10th position, Brian.
Well, Ben, we never really saw, the inversion of the field matter because Hayden, Soto, and Banks were leading the race at one point. It was accidents on track that have really mixed up that field because that inversion, it worked perfectly for those cars that were in the 8th to 6th spot starting this race. And then all of a sudden, they started to catch lap traffic. They started to battle more with themselves. They started to drop wheels off track. And all of a sudden, drivers who were leading went from first place to Banks, in 5th place, 13 seconds off pace.
Yeah, and the field is really spread out right now. As you see our times on the tower on the left-hand side here, it's really, for the most part, a two-man breakaway of Clifton and Hayden, but it seems at parts that Clifton is actually pulling away, and as they say that he drops 2/10, but, I'm not exactly quite sure. The lap times seem very similar between the two top drivers, but we have a little bit of action here towards the middle positions. We've got Coy McGrath sitting in 4th, currently up 16 positions. Started this whole mess. Troy Banks sitting in 5th, right about where he had, and Corey Abbott up 4 positions, 6th. And I don't know. I mean, they kind of look like they're spreading out, and as the race progresses, drivers are kind of getting into their rhythm and setting sail for what the rest of the race is looking.
So far, Sato has the fastest lap of the race. The only two drivers who are running 09s are our two lead drivers of Hayden and Clifton. and they are turning just mirror laps, as you mentioned. An 0966 for Clifton and 0961 for Hayden. That's good news if you're a fan of Jimmy Hayden, because he is still making ground on Clifton very slowly, only a few tenths here and there. But since this is a 30-second or 30-minute race, you do have plenty of time to get back to Clifton. And once you start to get into that second window, these cars are going to start to draft. It's not like Formula One, Ben, where you have DRS, but these things are like bricks through the air. As soon as you actually catch that draft, you'll be behind that driver in no time.
Yeah, and as you say that, we're watching Hayden on that straightaway just take a big chunk out of Clifton's lead and having the same pace on the more turny, complicated section of the track. He's really going to be able to vet that advantage when he gets to the straightaway again if he can stay in range, slowly pick away at this lead. Just have a very clear and consistent two-car breakaway, and both of these drivers are looking very on form. Absolute brilliant race from Clifton so far, and of course Jimmy looking to climb his way back to the top of the leaderboards again, Brian.
Jimmy Hayden just laid the fastest lap of the day, not the session, not the previous race, not qualifying, a 109.8. And his opponent of Caleb Clifton ran a 109.42. So things are looking great for Hayden. And that's because he's in that draft. His lap times are going to get faster and faster as he continues to reel in Clifton. Now, Hayden did make a small mistake on the back straight, but that's all going to be mitigated as he's now on the front straight. We're on board with Hayden, about to go for this pass. Hayden's going to look on the inside, but he's going to think better. He's going to go for the longer radius corner, but this is going to set himself up for turn 3.
Yeah, and I'm not 100% convinced that Jimmy has the advantage in the complicated sections here through the turning parts of the track, but it seems like when he gets to the straightaway every time, uses that draft to catch right up to the bumper, so something has to be going right for him. We'll really see now that Clifton's got a mirror full of that 42 car, he might start to make some mistakes.
Brian Voles has just found himself off pit lane right now. He's still 3 laps down. He had a great run earlier on today. It's a frustrating place for him to be. Oh, he's still on pit lane. We saw him rolling just a bit. He might have found himself in another accident rolling off pit lane. It's a bad position for him to be in, but he was one of the fastest drivers in our open qualifier. He was looking like a driver who could battle with the Cliftons, Haydens, and Satos of this world, but for whatever reason today, this debut performance in Downshift Esports, a recruitment race, is not working for him.
You see the drivers going right back, and Jimmy Hayden is on the outside now. They're going to go too wide into turn 1, as we saw Brian sitting in the pits. Almost kind of sad to see his right front sitting there. It looks like it had a puncture into it, but we're back to the cars that are running at more optimal positions here, Brian. And Jimmy just put the move on him right there. I mean, there he goes. But now the real test starts. The question I have for you is, can Jimmy Hayden pull away with this draft?
Most likely not, because the corners here at Lime Rock are just so long. Honestly, if I was Hayden, I would have maintained my second spot. I would be lifting on the straights for a couple of reasons: to reduce fuel consumption and save my tires. Every single time that you hop offline, you're going to be burning more and more of those tires. Over the course of a 30-minute race, these Formula V tires drop off heavy. These tires are like bricks. At the first start of the stint, they don't absorb temperature, and once they do start to absorb temperature, they just start to fall off. These tires weren't necessarily designed to be road racing tires. They were created partly for the car, but also to be a competitive tire, which means they're going to have degradation.
Yeah, and as we see, we've got a little bit of lap traffic that might possibly be a factor here, as Jimmy Hayden has to check up as he slides off the line, just like you were saying there. He's got very worn tires, kind of shifting up and pushing towards the middle of the corner there, almost making tire-on-tire contact, which would have been terrible for him, but he manages to slip by, and Caleb Clifton staying right in his slipstream, pull right behind him. These guys are far from done here, Brian.
This is a 30-minute race spin, and so far our top drivers are turning about a minute 10 on the laps. So we're looking about approximately 25 to 28 laps to be completed here at Lime Rock. Clifton has looked solid, but he's made his first critical error. He was just tenths behind Jimmy Hayden, and now he's three seconds. Nowhere to be seen in the rearview mirrors of Hayden, and Sato is going to be loving this.
Yeah, and speaking of critical errors, I'd like to go back if we can and take a look at what seems to be a horrible crash. Boy McGrath, that may have knocked him off of his position here as he's coming out of looks to be one of the final corners. Not sure if he got help there. No, he just got loose and hooked it and just bumps the wall a little bit. So might not be terrible damage to his race there, but sometimes it really does not take a whole lot with these cars. And I don't know, might be sitting in a bad spot now after he had done that damage. Now 20 seconds off of the lead cars here.
And then all black car behind that was Banks, just barely missing that mistake. Here's Banks in that 24 car. He started this race up in the 5th spot, and he's going to be moving 1 spot forward in 4th. Now, at a time, Banks was leading this race, but he got mixed up in an earlier track incident, Ben.
Yeah, and you see him getting a little bit closer. He's got to catch Soto in the 21 car. You see the white car a little bit ways ahead. This is the 2 car of Kenny McGrath that he is putting another lap down. But really reeling in over the past couple laps on Soto here, trying to fight his way up to a podium. See, somewhat identical lap times, Brian, but that draft is going to be a factor here shortly if he could pick away. And as we saw with Jimmy Hayden, Caleb Clifton, once that comes into play, it does not take too long.
Soto and Banks need to work together. And what that looks like is they're going to slot in behind each other and they're just going to draft. They're going to push. Now, since the Formula V is kind of a pointy nose, you're not going to really have the luxury of, actually truly pushing the car in front of you like you would if you're in a stock car, but you can still use that draft as an advantage and just continue on forward. If Banks and Soto work together, they have hopes of catching Clifton and Hayden. And Clifton, who made a mistake just 2 laps ago, he dropped 3 seconds off the pace, and he seems to be more or less maintaining that.
Yeah, to navigate that lap car, I'm not quite sure if I would say that Soto or Banks had caught it in a bad spot. Oh, as you see the 24 car go around,
it's Banks,
and the checkered flag has just come out. I believe we may have hit our end session timer there, and again, we apologize very dearly for all of the technical frustrating from a event organizer perspective. It's not exactly what we were looking for today, but drivers coming across the line here with race results be functioning properly either, much like the rest of the session. I apologize.
Damn technology.
But it does look like to the line. I believe if our scoring chart there is correct, that Coy McGrath recovering from spin, getting by Banks and Corey Abbott as well, sneaking up 4th place. But Jimmy Hayden will go on. Jimmy Hayden will be our victor in the race. On lap now with Clifton hanging out not too far behind, but a masterclass. He ends up winning both of them. That's crazy.
I mean, the story has been all Jimmy Hayden. He had great runs in qualifying. He was the fastest driver in qualifying, fastest driver during the heat race. And I mean, he wasn't able to win the heat race and end up winning actual main race of the day. What a strong performance. It's looked Jimmy Hayden pretty much every single bend here at Lime Rock. Now, sure, other drivers have been able to lead the main event, but Hayden has always been 2 or 3 cars behind. I mean, Hayden started in 8th place since we had the inverted field, and Hayden was in 2nd place with just a nose ahead of Banks. I mean, it was an incredible performance. The way that Hayden was able to negotiate the field was textbook.
Yeah, it was just a fantastic run, Hayden. I mean, getting to and being able to recover and then nab the win again. I mean, I can't stress enough, just a masterclass of a race, especially with everything. We have a demolition derby here in turn 1. Drivers vetting out some of the frustrations. Just what a race, even with all the technical. I gotta say, these guys really did putting on quite the show, and I couldn't be happier here. I couldn't be happier to have you with me, Brian. It was a great time.
Ben, It was lovely. We're going to be diving over to a quick intermission. Ladies and gentlemen, keep this tab open. We'll be back with interviews with Jimmy Hayden momentarily. See you soon. The Formula V League and the recruitment race for Downshift Esports is back for our interview segment. My name is Brian Schubert. Ben Ropak will be joining me once again. I have some lovely faces also joining me in the broadcast booth. Jimmy Hayden, my friend, welcome. And also, what a phenomenal performance that you had today. What led to your success? Because you are dominant every single corner.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't really been on here in a couple weeks. I had to rush home from work. I just got on, ran a couple practice laps, and I guess I got a little lucky. I guess I don't know. Either that, or I'm just the best out there. I don't know, but
The latter.
Wow. What a
gotta
compelling
be a little
story.
cocky.
What a compelling story of hardship and true grit and practice
Yeah, none of
and
that. I just
over
came
fear.
out here and tore stuff up.
So I was gonna have a question, but I really don't have any questions for you, Jimmy, because you seem to wake up every morning and just do what you do, man. And I'm not gonna finish that one
And
because
piss excellence.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, there it is. So, but what I am gonna do is I am gonna ask. So Brian here and I were talking up in the. Brian has a lot of go karting, and I
Oh
know
yeah.
that's kind of been in your wheelhouse as well. So, do you think a lot of that real world driving experience kind of bleeds over into games or sims such as iRacing like this? That attribute that to any of your success?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like while it's a game versus real life, it's still the same skill set you need to apply. So just kind of being patient, not going out there and trying to win it right away, even though that's kind of what I tried to do tonight. Um, no, yeah, I mean, no, it's like, it's the same skill set. You just have to apply it a little differently when you're on a game versus real life.
Now, Jimmy, I kind of want you to elaborate upon that just a bit. Of course, iRacing, you don't really have that natural feel unless you have some crazy sim rig. So, how do you translate being a karter with, the full motion of the cart into iRacing?
That's a good question. I haven't really been in a cart in a couple of years. The majority of my experience lately has been tearing up the street in my Miata and iRacing. So, it's just practice, just understanding the car, what you can and can't do with it. Um, yeah, just being patient. That's the number one thing. Like I screwed up in lap 3 and just kind of kept my head down and was able to come back. So didn't get too ahead of myself.
Now, Coy, you are one of our legacy drivers here. You're coming in from our Street Stock series. What is it like stepping into a Formula V on a road course?
There's right turns.
Right turns are scary, eh?
Oh, yeah.
No,
Too. I
not
only
like
race
right turns.
circle tracks on go-karts, so this is all new to me.
Oh,
Sorry, go ahead,
really?
Corey.
Oh, okay. All right, Jimmy, get out, bro. This isn't your interview. This is mine now. Go away. Go away.
Banned. We're banning Jimmy. He's just too good.
You had yours. It's my turn. I'm important. Me.
But again, other than those right turns, what else is different from those street stocks?
Um. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. No. The. I mean, the whole environment is completely different. In street stock, you're bumping and you're running and you're doing, street stock stuff because you're driving a basically a tank. This is more like a missile. If you touch it, it explodes. So it's very, very different. It's a very different style of racing that you have to adapt to.
Well, Ben, you have any questions for Coy, and we can go over to Nick if you don't.
I had my mute button, much like much other technical things going there. So I guess that worked out well. So, but Koi, I have to mention, I really do like the comparison of the Formula V to a missile. Touch it and it explodes. And I think we saw a lot of that on track tonight. So I got to ask, with all of the action that was happening all over the place and everything, how many close calls did you have in that last race? I did particularly remember seeing you spin out on towards, I believe, one of the penultimate turns there and just narrowly tap the wall where you could get it spun back around and head back on track.
Uh, Close calls. Let's see. I think I had probably like 3 or 4 in the feature race, and then 0 in the sprint race because I died. Literally, my wheel fell off. So technically, not a close call. Yeah, I
Well,
was a
too
little
close, huh?
upset about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, too close. It kind of happened. So, I mean, no close calls. So, is that good? I don't know. You tell me. But anyway, yeah. So it was crazy. It was crazy out there. A lot of people spinning out in front of me, and just very. I gotta change my pants.
Too many code browns.
Way too many. Somebody's got to clean that seat. I'm not doing it because I can't be bothered. It smells really, really bad. Someone get on that. Someone in the pit crew.
Well, Coy, you had
Well, Chloe, it was
strong.
great talking to you, Nick.
Jimmy, you're
Coy,
a great
you had a
man.
great race today, but over to Nick. You had a strong qualifying and you had a good initial showing, but Nick, what happened in the end? You end up falling 2 laps down.
Yeah, so basically, I've never driven this track or especially with the V before tonight. So I put in a few laps. I got my best time to like a 110. But qualifying, I got messed up by some people, coming in from the pits on my hot lap. And then after the heat race, I hit someone on turn 1 because they spun out in front of me and I kind of ARCA braked it. But then my strategy starting from 18th in the main race was just to not crash and build spots by attrition and just drive as smooth and fast as I can. But I bungled it towards the end. I needed to get a repair, and I spent my last like 2 or 3 laps with a broken steering. So getting 11, I had an outside shot at number 10. If I didn't crash, I was in line to get it. But I would say there's nothing I can really do there, but that really wasn't the case because I crashed against nobody. So that's really what it was.
Well, I definitely think that you weren't alone there. And Nick, again, I apologize for butchering your last name, as I will continue
Everybody does,
not
no worries.
pronounce it in this because I will probably butcher it again. But I do have to ask. So this is one of the first additions that we have to Downshift leagues is this open qualifying set. You're on track with all of the other drivers and being in your own instance. It's kind of wondering, since you did have a lot of close calls, as you put in your own words, what was your opinion on how that went versus, like, say, laps in an individual session?
I feel like it's just too many cars, and since there's not a much of like habit or rehearsal on it, it was a little rough. I think it would maybe be better just to do 2 or 3 laps where you can sort of hot lap it. But I mean, either or. If you have a heat race, it doesn't really matter. The only thing I would say is that the split on the heat race was a little weird. I don't know if that was it, if the split just didn't happen the way it was supposed to or what. But all the top people were in the same heat. I don't know if that was just there wasn't enough people, but
Yeah, and as advertised, the initial intention was for it to be one heat that took the top 25 drivers from the heat event and pushed them into the main event, and then in the main event, the top 8 would invert. And some of that happened, some of that didn't happen. And I believe race control had to call end of race on both situations, so everything went smoothly and there were 0 issues. Yeah, but no, I appreciate the feedback, and it definitely was a melee as Brian and I are sitting watching qualifying cars spinning, bumping, and there was a couple melee sessions. I think we had 2 cars ejected from the race from qualifying, so definitely
right.
definitely interesting. But I'm glad you did end up making it through at least most of the heartache here and coming home 11th. Looking to maybe build some momentum and be a little bit better coming into the actual points race next Thursday.
Yeah, no, hopefully. Fingers crossed that I can make it, but I don't think I have any conflicts, so I expect to be there.
I love hearing that. Gentlemen, thank you so much for stopping on by. Nick, Coy, you had a wonderful run today. And Jimmy, it's been your show all day. Gentlemen, have a wonderful rest of your evening and take care.
It's his last show.
Perma banned. Get him out of here.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll see